This is one of my filterless 25 litre or 6.6 US gallon Walstad Method aquariums, and it's exactly the kind of setup I'd recommend for anyone starting their very first Walstad Method tank. The substrate is made up of ½ inch of topsoil, which is then capped with fine gravel, and the various plants in here offer natural filtration, maintaining safe and stable water parameters. Thanks to the Limnophila sessiliflora and Spirodela polyrhiza plants in this particular setup, I haven't had a single issue with the water quality in here, and toxic ammonia and toxic nitrite levels have consistently been undetectable. The tank is currently 111 days old, so for today's video I'll be sharing this month's update on how the tank is performing. So starting with the fish, and I have 3 platinum Japanese Medaka rice fish in here, and all of them are healthy. I have noticed at least one of them carrying eggs several times since I set this tank up, but I've never seen any baby fish in the setup. I'm not sure if the eggs just aren't fertilised or if it's because the shrimp are eating them, because I've seen shrimp in some of my other tanks eating the Medaka rice fish eggs in there. That's not really a huge concern for me because breeding my fish just isn't a big part of the hobby for me, but I would love to get some more platinum Medaka because they are my favourite line of rice fish, and being able to breed them would give me a more consistent supply while keeping my costs low. On the topic of getting more Japanese Medaka rice fish, one of my local shops, Gateshead Guppies, does currently have some available, so I'm planning to go through this coming weekend and pick some up, but I will talk about more on that later in the video. Other than that though, the fish have settled into this setup really well, and they're into a stable routine of eating their food, then trying to steal the shrimp food, and then looking around the tank for any other food that they might have missed. There's no signs of stress or illness or anything like that with the fish either, so I do think they are doing well. Moving on to the Neocaridina shrimp in the tank, because this is home to my Skittles colony, so I've got red, orange, yellow and blue Neocaridina shrimp all mixed together just like the Skittles sweets or candy. I keep Neocaridina shrimp in all of my tanks, but in this one I did decide to mix the lines up a little bit as an experiment. Last month I did mention that 2 of the females were carrying eggs, and this month both of them have given birth. From what I can tell, one mother has produced a batch of red babies and the other has produced a batch of yellow. Now I'm not sure whether that's because they were bred in the line-specific breeding tanks that the breeder had before I actually purchased them and put them in here, or if it's just luck of the draw and they have actually bred in this tank. But this has skewed the data for the experiment a little bit because there's far more red and yellow shrimp in this tank now when compared to the orange and blues. On top of that, there's also another pregnant yellow female in the tank, and I did try to record her, but by the time I got my phone she'd moved and I haven't seen her since. So that means there are more babies on the way, and I might end up getting a mixed batch of babies with this one. But just like with the Medaka rice fish in the tank, the shrimp seem really settled, calm and relaxed, and they are constantly breeding. Moving on to the plants, and I leave a full plant list in the video description along with links to my various care guides on the plants so you can decide if they're a good fit for your own aquariums. As I mentioned earlier, the Limnophila sessiliflora in the back centre of the tank and the Spirodela polyrhiza floating plant on the surface are doing the bulk of the heavy lifting in here. That means that they are responsible for naturally purifying the water, which keeps both the Medaka rice fish and the Neocaridina shrimp safe and healthy. The Rotala Rotundifolia in the back left and back right of the tank will help with this a little bit too, but it does have a far slower growth rate compared to the 2 primary filtration plants. All of the other plants in this particular setup are simply for decoration and to add more surface area for more grazing space for the shrimp. All of the plants are looking really healthy overall, and the Helenthium telenum green in the foreground, which I want to grow into a carpet over time, does seem to be sending out more and more runners, so we should get that carpet coming in soon. Just to quickly touch on tank maintenance, because I'm in a pretty standard routine with this tank already, which is a good sign. The only things I'm really doing is trimming the excess stem plant growth back and thinning out the floating plants when needed, which is roughly once every 2 to 3 weeks. Then I do top up the evaporated water with fresh, dechlorinated tap water. That's because the plants are just doing such a good job of keeping all of the water parameters in the tank safe and stable, and I link to my article on how plants can naturally filter aquarium water in the video description to help give anyone who's new to the hobby more confidence in this system. But the main thing to take away is this is basically on the standard maintenance routine that I have with all of my other Walstad Method tanks in my fish room, where it really doesn't take much time to maintain it every month. One thing that I do want to quickly touch on is the algae growth in this tank, which is actually the result of a mistake that I made this month. Since I knew some of the female shrimp were carrying eggs, I did want to try and make sure that there was plenty of food available for the babies to maximise their survival rates. So my plan was to add one Hikari mini algae wafer per day, the same way I do with a couple of my other 25 litre shrimp tanks. Where I made the mistake was that I overlooked that those tanks are almost a year and a half old now, with far more mature ecosystems and far larger shrimp colonies. This tank, on the other hand, is only a few months old with a far smaller shrimp colony, so those algae wafers ended up spiking the nitrate levels, which ended up in an algae bloom. Now if you're new, it's ammonia and nitrite that are toxic, and the nitrate that spiked in this tank is far less toxic and it didn't get anywhere close to dangerous levels, so my fish and shrimp in here were perfectly safe the full time. But in a roundabout way, this has actually helped me reach my end goal by making sure there's plenty of food in here for the shrimp, because they will happily eat soft green algae and soft brown algae without issue, so they are going to be eating that instead of the dry foods that I was initially adding. I have stopped adding the algae wafers for now to try and get the algae growth under control and get it to slow down, and between that and the shrimp constantly grazing on it, it should gradually clear up. But this does highlight the reason why a lot of people doing this type of experiment with Skittle shrimp or just any type of Neocaridina shrimp breeding tank usually use a dedicated tank. It's just far easier to manage the nitrate levels and find a better balance between algae growth and aesthetics, whereas with a display tank like this one, you usually don't want much algae, especially on the plants and substrate. So moving on, and that brings me to the future of this specific tank, because there are going to be some changes. As I mentioned earlier, I am planning to pick up some more Japanese Medaka rice fish this coming weekend from a local aquatic shop. The new arrivals will be going into my recently cycled 45 litre or 12 US gallon tank, which will be planted by then, and once I'm confident they're healthy, I will be moving the Platinum Medaka from this setup over to that one. I'm also thinking of moving my orange and black Medaka from one of my other 25 litre tanks over to that 45 litre tank too. That's because one of my main goals for the coming year is to upgrade all of the fish that I currently have in my 25 litre tanks up to 45 or even 54 litre setups, depending on my space availability. This increases the available swim space for the fish and hopefully helps improve their quality of life while in my care. That means that this specific tank will end up being a shrimp only tank once I've moved the Platinum Medaka from it over to the new setup. But with this colony constantly breeding, and like I said, I've currently got 2 batches of babies and a pregnant female carrying eggs already, the bio load is increasing, so by the time I move the Platinum Medaka out of here, the shrimp should in theory be able to support the plants with their waste. This is actually ideal because I want to keep this setup running for as long as possible to get more data on my Skittles Neocaridina shrimp experiment. My plan is to run it for at least a year just to see what happens with the colour quality of the shrimp when the lines start to mix. But because this tank has been so stable and trouble-free right from the very start, I just don't think it makes sense to keep doing long-form monthly updates on it because there's very little to report. So unless something drastic happens, I will hold off until the 1 year mark and make another big update then. In the meantime, I will still post monthly short form updates for the tank to keep everyone updated with what's happening. But long forms take more effort and I just don't see the point when moving forward. All I think I'll be doing is saying I trimmed the Limnophila, I trimmed the Rotala, I removed the excess polyrhiza off the top, and I added new water to counter evaporation. It just gets boring. Anyway guys, that brings the video to an end. I hope it's been helpful. Thanks for watching and good luck with your Walstad Method aquariums.